Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Environmental and Social Impact of Nature-Based Solutions. Before we start, just a couple of quick points about the webinar. Everyone is muted today to preserve sound quality. Please ask as many questions as you like as we go along, and we will be answering them in the chat button, some of our lovely colleagues in the background. We'll also pause today to answer some of the questions live at the end of the webinar. I would like to introduce our presenters today. My name is Elena Miles, and I am the Partnership Manager with Climate Partner Impact. We also have three of our wonderful project developers here today. We've got Nimal, Otto, and Angela, who will be sharing their on-the-ground insights about our projects. So, who are we at Climate Partner Impact? At Climate Partner Impact, we develop innovative solutions and innovative projects with positive environmental and social impact that empower local communities. The focus of today's session specifically will be nature-based solutions. We will start by explaining what nature-based solutions are, how they work, and why nature is one of the most impactful tools that we have to mitigate climate change and transform local communities. We will do this by showcasing three of our nature-based solution projects, where each of our project developers will share the specific details about the project and the environmental and community impact. I will then share with you why the companies that we work with invest in nature-based solutions and the different ways to get involved. So let's start with this question. Why are we doing a webinar on nature-based solutions? Before we talk about the why, let me start by explaining what nature-based solutions are. Nature-based solutions are projects that work with nature to address big environmental or social challenges. Things like climate change, water security, and other important issues. These projects use natural processes and ecosystems. For example, things like restoring forests or mangroves, regenerative agriculture, or other nature-based solutions. At Climate Partner Impact, we have many different projects. We have plastic projects, biochar projects, cook stoves, and many, many others. However, our biggest focus area are nature-based solutions. So why are they so important? The reason why they're so important is that nature-based solutions can really accelerate the path to net zero. Nature-based projects such as afforestation, reforestation, mangrove restoration, and others, just these projects alone can effectively solve 1/3 of all the cost-effective climate mitigation that we need between now and 2030. What makes this project even more special is that there are many, many additional benefits that they bring to the environment and to the local communities. These projects often help us with biodiversity restoration. They help us to empower local communities with poverty eradication, providing jobs and resilience. They provide food and water security and contribute to many, many different sustainable development goals. However, the gap between where we are and where we need to be to get to those 2030 goals is huge. To achieve the Paris Agreement goals, we need at least additional 4.3 trillion US dollars in annual finance between now and 2030. So that's really the reason for this webinar. We want to work with companies that are climate leaders that want to contribute to that global net zero. Okay, you might say, that all sounds really lovely, but I just don't have time, energy, money, or headspace for it right now. we are very much just focusing on internal reductions. And that's a very common approach that we see. And when we speak to companies about climate action, we always stress that absolutely the first priority should always be focusing on internal reductions. However, we've seen lots of modeling which confirms that simply focusing on internal decarbonization alone will not get us to the global net zero. It is simply not enough. What we do see is there's pretty consistent recommendation from many different standards and worldwide leaders, which suggest that companies must do both, reduce internally within their value chain, and also contribute to global net zero outside of their value chain. Because the important thing to realize is even if you're doing an amazing job focusing on reduction, while you're doing that, you're still continuing to emit. So I just want to quickly show you this graph here, which is adapted from science-based target initiatives. And what you see here is what happens with your emissions over time. So everyone who's attending this webinar, I know is not here where you're doing business as usual and your emissions are continuing to grow. I know if you're here, you're passionate about climate action and you're reducing quite aggressively. So this line is going downwards, which is great, which is what we want to see. Very, very positive. However, this area in gray underneath that line shows you your actual emissions. So on one hand, what we're not even showing is you've got all those historical emissions, which you're not taking into account. But even going forward, as you've got your net zero targets and you're aggressively reducing your emissions, you're actually continuing to emit. In other words, the only way to catch up and to achieve that global net zero is for companies to do both. Continue to focus aggressively on internal decarbonization, but also contribute outside of your value chain. There's absolutely no way to avoid this. And it has to start today, not in the future. And it's about taking that step forward to both internal reductions, but also achieving global net zero. Now, let's have a think about it a little bit more. As a humanity, we are now at a critical point in our history, and every single one of us must act urgently. For companies, as I've mentioned, that means that both internal reductions and contributions to climate projects are critical at the same time. We all want to make sure that we get to that 4.3 trillion US dollars funding gap so that we can leave a livable planet to our children. And importantly, as industrialized nations, we are largely the ones responsible for climate change. Yet it's the nations in the global south that are suffering the effects of climate change the most. So that's really what our projects are about. We want to help the climate, we want to heal the planet, but we also want to empower and build resilience in the communities in the global south. And now I am so delighted to pass over to our first project developer who'll tell you about our amazing project in East India. I'll hand over to Nimal, who'll tell you about our Tasasil project. Thank you very much.
Hello again all, I am Nirmal. I am the Head of Project Development in Climate Partner Impact. My role is to generate excitement among teams and team members on project design, development, and delivery. All of them are quite challenging tasks in itself, but in the end, our day-to-day jobs is to generate impactful stories, the one of which is I'm presenting today. So we're talking about the East India Tasir afforestation projects. Just giving a little bit background on the project is that this is in the eastern part of India's, some around 500 kilometers from Calcutta, in the region called Jharkhand and West Bengal. This is a very small pocket home to indigenous tribes. Some of them you can already see in the picture, women tribes from Urao and Khadia. And the context is that just behind them you see a large tract of lands, empty, unused, fallow, with no agriculture at all. So that's the context we have. We have land degradation not being used for many, many years because it's not productive. And then we have a situation where the poverty incidence in these pockets are quite high. Looking at this context, we see that the agriculture is quite not productive, not remunerative, and that's the reason the poverty incidence is high. The reason why agriculture is not so remunerative is because it's a rain-fed condition. We are talking about only 3-4 months of rains in a year, and rest of the time it is fallow, low fertility. Yeah, of course, because the crops that are being cultivated are primarily for subsistence agriculture, meaning that it is rice and millets. And after that, they really don't have an income opportunity. Consequently, they are migrating to nearby towns and cities for looking for work. And in most cases, the men will migrate seasonally and women will stay at home. Nevertheless, they still have a need for generating cash income for their daily use and expenses, which is not a possibility. So that's a very challenging context. In this context, we are looking at a solution where we can link them to Tasar silk value chain. And now Tasar is one of the silk in India. There are 3 to 4 such Tasar silk varieties. Tasar is the one that is grown in the wild. In this particular geography, we are looking at forest where Tasar is growing naturally, but these forests are public lands. It belongs to the forest department. So the indigenous communities will not have access and very less control on the income. What the project is trying to do is doing the same thing that is done in the forest naturally, bringing it back to such large, wasteland that is available as individual private lands. So now they have greater control on the piece of land because it belongs to them, and of course on the income because it is growing on their own land. So what is being planted is the silkos trees. As I said, it's two main tree species called Terminilla arjuna and tomentosa, locally also known as Arjuna and Asan. These host the silkworms. So when they grow, the trees are almost ready by 3rd to 5th years, on which the silk can then be mounted. We are looking at a planting model where in the main plot we have the silkos trees, and then on the boundaries we have the forestry species, which more work like a windbreaks. All of these are native to the geography. As I said, these are already growing in the forest. What the project is doing is to bring it back to individual lands and make it productive, make these lands productive in that sense. They grow very well in drought conditions. You've seen the low fertility soil in the last slide. And this has been tested and tried over 30 years with our local partners. So it's nothing that is being tried new. It has been growing well, very well before. All that it does is to expand this trees to private lands. There are 2 things to note here is that in general, these communities are very nature worshippers. Their primary gods are sun, the moon, the planet, the earth, which aligns very well to a very cultural norm to protecting trees and nurturing these trees for a very long-term protections. The second thing is very common, very distinct here in this project is that women take the lead. So they are the one that are looking after the trees and maintaining it because they're likely to get an income from it. Coming back on the same solutions on how does this degraded lands create an economic venture, we are looking to link this to the silk value chain. Again, the silk value chain is quite predominant here. We have the Eco Tasar Private Limited, which is a market wing to the partner, which links the Tasar to the market. The primary producer is, of course, the women that you see on the left. This is the tree that is grown. After the 4th and the 5th year, we already start seeing silk being mounted. It is being processed by the women itself, and then the buyers are also women. So it's a very great demand for Tasar silk saris among the women in India. The primary demand is domestic, but there is also a lot of international market. So we are likely to generate from this 2,000 hectares of plantation that is happening, roughly annually of 3.6 million euros annual income that will grow to this women. The processors, the producers, and the buyers, all of them, are women. So in that sense, this is entirely promoting the work of the Tasar Silk Value Chain. Coming to the very brief description on what the project is doing, we are looking at restoring the 2,000 hectares. It generates above 4,000 new jobs that has been created entirely on the silk value chain, as I said, entirely targeted on women. It gives them the skills required to make that transition from subsistence agriculture to income options through the silk value chain. What it creates is a productive asset from wastelands, which had no use a few years before. Suddenly, these wastelands have become very, very dear to women. Plantations taking shape on these pieces of land, offering a sustained income source for them. At the same time, it's becoming a very biodiversity kind of a hotspot, because there are friends of silkworms. There are also foes of silkworms, but nevertheless, the baseline is zero. And given that it's a flat piece of land, nothing is happening, to a very mature forest with all the flora and fauna coming back to this piece of land. So in a way, it is already promoting a lot of biodiversity from a baseline of zero. Coming to the standards, it's a Vera methodology, CDM methodology, old CDM methodology. It has been validated very recently. We are just requested the registration to happen in 1 or 2 months, and then we are looking to verify the project in the upcoming year. The planting of 2,000 hectares has happened in the last 3 years. So there are 3-year-old trees as a minimum. And then we are looking to move forward and maintain and nurture them further. Impact, again, is very, very straightforward in the sense that we are focusing on 4 such impacts. One is the income that is going to women through the silk value chain. This is cash income directly in their own hand, and they have full control to spend the income in a way that they would feel appropriate, which is what we are focusing here. Second is that it's like the ladies going back to school, again, learning the technical skills, both on the production side, that means how to plant a tree, nurture the tree, maintain the tree, whereas we are also providing them the skills to rear the silk, take care of the silkworm, see them forming into cocoons and thereafter selling in the market. These are, again, target entirely at women. Around 90% plus are women in this entire value chain. Only a set of weavers, which is a technical skill that men carry. So that's the only component in this entire silk value chain which is for men. Otherwise, everything else remains with the women. So it completely takes care of this gender equality of 5. And last is, of course, because of the planting, is the sequestration that is happening and helping the planet. Coming to the last slide, this is a visual one to see where we are in the project. So on the left hand side, you see what is the kind of land as the baseline. Nothing is grown. It's just as I said, a flat piece of land. Nothing is happening there. Nurseries, you go to the next photo, is where women they form the nurseries themselves, of course technically supported by us, and make the nursery. The third photo is a 1-year-old photo, a 1-year planting old photo, where women again take care of the entire process. Coming down on the left side, you see a 2-year-old photo. The next to it is a 2-year again photo, but with a cocoon. The lady Sarita Devi is showing one cocoon. It's not clearly visible here. So the first cocoon has come in the 2nd year, which is a good sign in the project that we are anticipating in the 5th year, but it's already started to come up, which is again supporting the biodiversity in the sense that silkworms are already selecting these young seedlings as their host trees, as their home, and we are likely to see this going up in the next coming years. The 5th photo is, again, culturally, these are really cohesive units of plantations. There is strong involvement of communities, and as I said, they hold it dear. especially the women, because they want this recurring income to happen for 50 long years. The plantations has a longevity period of more than 50 years. So this is a recurring income coming to them every year for the next 50 years. So a lot of excitement and a lot of celebration, I would say, for this project to continue. And we see a long future and a very impactful future in the upcoming year. This is a photo of a drone of the planting area. As you see, very well maintained and taken care of with all the intercultural operations that happens to make sure that the plantations are all right. And I think it's a lovely story upcoming in the in the upcoming years. We likely to grow and see the cocoons and the silk value chain undertaking a significant growth in India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nimal. What an inspiring project. You know, it's this area that has was so degraded, such huge levels of unemployment, and now we've got this whole community of Indigenous women that have, most of them have never had a job outside of home before, feeling so empowered and proud of the contribution they're making to their community and their family. Really, really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I would now like to hand over to Otto, our next project developer, who will share an equally amazing project, but this one located in South Africa. Over to you, Otto.
Thank you. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining this and sharing with us in these exciting projects. Yeah, it's very exciting to see these so much interest in it. You know, we spend so much of our time, effort, passion on developing these projects, doing due diligence on these projects, and seeing them come to fruition. It's great to see all the interest. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be telling you today about a speckworm restoration project in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Now, I've spent the last decade of my life working in ecosystem restoration and more than half of that doing work on the ground, developing these ecosystem restoration projects and seeing them into implementation. And for the last 3 years, I've been working with Climate Partner Impact and doing due diligence and project development and facilitating these projects to their fruition. So the thicket biome is quite a significant place. It's one of 36 biodiversity hotspots globally, and it extends across 275,000 square kilometers through South Africa and into Mozambique and Lesotho. But the Albany thicket biome only occurs in South Africa and has about 1,800 species in it. And it's yeah, I'd say I think 380 of those species are of conservation concern. But land degradation has really taken its toll over the last 200 years. And we've seen the loss of about 3 million hectares of the thicket biome in South Africa. This is quite significant. But there is a solution. And over the last 2 decades and more, there's been a lot of research, trial and error into how we can go about restoring the thicket biome again. And a feasible solution that has come out of all of this effort is the planting of speckworm. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about speckworm just now. But this has the ability to really regenerate vast areas across the thicket biome through a very simple approach. It is the planting of one single species, which is an ecosystem engineer and has the potential to regenerate ecosystem services and really bring back the biodiversity that once flourished in this area. Okay, so speckworm is quite a long-lived species. It can live, you know, typically between 200 and 300 years old, but we've come across plants that are over 500 years old. It's really quite an incredible species. One of the features of it is that it follows 2 photosynthetic pathways. So it absorbs carbon both as a succulent, but also as a tree. And this makes it really resilient to arid landscapes. And the other thing that it does is it drops leaves really rapidly, creating a lot of leaf litter on the soil. That becomes soil organic carbon, which then also increases other ecosystem functions, such as water retention in the soil. But more importantly, it starts generating this environment that is conducive to other species returning. And what we see where thicket or where speckboom has been planted in mass, other species start returning naturally without actually having to plant them. And one might ask, like, why do we not plant other species? Well, because the cost-benefit ratios just don't make sense. It becomes very expensive. So the majority of species that occur in thicket really only occur in this dense shaded forest type environment that is thicket. And so a lot of these species just simply won't survive if we had to go and plant them. And the cost of actually producing them and then replacing them isn't really feasible. And then, of course, I've mentioned it brings back a lot of ecosystem services from the water cycles, nutrient cycles, and really does create a landscape scale impact. And then on top of that, and the metric that we typically use to measure the success is its carbon sequestration capacity. So for each hectare that's restored, you're looking at 530 tons of carbon dioxide being captured into that environment. And this is with a healthy buffer on top of that. So yeah, it really does, tick so many different boxes in terms of the ecosystem aspects, the carbon sequestration aspects, and we'll go into some of the socioeconomic aspects as well. So this project is registered under Verra. Registration has been requested and the validation has been completed, but it is also going to be pursuing SD Vista certification through Verra, standard, SD Vista. And next slide. Okay, so just a little bit of context to this area and socioeconomic poverty. So this area has more than 60% unemployment rate, and typically people used to rely on agriculture, particularly goat and sheep farming in this region, for employment. But due to the degradation, that employment opportunity is quickly disappearing, and farmers are rapidly leaving these areas. It's just not viable anymore to farm goat and sheep. Once upon a time, goat and sheep were the largest product coming out of this region. If you think back to the 1930s, the wool export from Angora goat and sheep was 8 times that of gold and diamonds out of South Africa. And South Africa is known for its gold and diamond export. So you can imagine just the immense amounts of animals that used to roam these habitats, and has actually caused this destruction for short-term gains. And now we sit with this incredible problem of degradation, and not just environmental degradation, but socioeconomic degradation as well. So besides just employing a lot of people to actually do the work on the ground and plant these plants, care for these plants, a lot of other aspects are going to be provided as well. So in terms of long-term conservation and career development. So but ultimately farming is no longer available. Restoration is really the only alternate land use practice for these areas. Yeah, so this project has pretty ambitious SD Vista goals. Among which is employment and career development, but there are also extensive feeding and vegetable garden programs going on both on site and at local schools. Malnutrition is a real problem in that area. It's very, very remote. The local town, for instance, doesn't have fresh vegetables. So the only vegetables and fruit that people get in the local town is tinned. So yeah, there have been some projects up and going to develop vegetable gardens at schools and on site to feed staff. Healthcare is really restricted in this area. So one of the activities that's going to be taking place, or is taking place rather, is a mobile clinic that comes to site every single month to make sure that all of the healthcare needs are met for the staff, as well as at the local school. There are, of course, skills development programs, and there have been natural ecosystem and nature programs being worked into the school curriculum. There's a big focus on female empowerment, with at least 50% of the workforce being female, but even more so in leadership positions. Because it's such an arid region, water provision is a big problem. And again, there's a focus on work staff, so the local schools. So water tanks are being deployed for fresh drinking water. And then there's really a long-term conservation and biodiversity management strategy that I'll touch on in just a moment. Okay, so this is really such a large-scale problem, and one that really needs a pretty simple approach to addressing. In this picture, you can see just across the landscape used to be this dense thicket habitat, and as far as you can see, there's degradation. So on top of actually doing the work on the ground, these projects are also going to be registered as protected areas so that they are conserved in perpetuity. One of the stipulations in that protected areas registration is that the land cannot go back to agriculture again. So it really is a long-term conservation focus. And then it forms part of a much larger conservancy framework and protected areas expansion strategy. So this first project covers 5,500 hectares of degraded thickets. It's a group project that'll extend across 16,000 hectares. But there's really a lot of work to do, hope to be able to explain more to anybody who's interested, and explain more about this wonderful project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Otto. An absolutely brilliant project. And like you said, it's so exciting to see the first signs of some of the wildlife returning to the area. We've had some sightings of giraffes and some other animals that haven't been seen in the area for decades as a result of speckbone planting. So it's really, really wonderful. The next project is equally as amazing as this one. I'll now pass over to Angela, who's going to tell us about our Rwanda project. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Alina. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Rubilla, and I am from the project development team for nature-based solutions at Climate Partner Impact, working together with Nirmal and Otto. And over the next 9.5 minutes, I am excited to share with you our Rwanda Bamboo River Restoration Project, which I am sharing now on my screen. So just to set the scene a little, Rwanda is quite often referred to as the land of 1,000 hills, and you'll see that through the pictures that we'll be sharing here over the next slides. It's a very small landlocked country in East Africa and is bordered by Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi in the north, east, and south, respectively. And it's so small that it's only over half the size of Switzerland. And with a population of about 14 million, it's actually one of the countries in Africa with the highest population densities. So thinking about a lot of people in such a small space, balancing agriculture with conservation as well as community well-being can be challenging, but it is absolutely essential and can definitely be made possible. So the way of life and economy in Rwanda is mostly rural. Most of the families live off of the land, and that's through forestry or farming, through the rich soil that can be found all over the countries, and it's ideal for crops and trees. And in fact, over 70% of the land surface has already been converted for agriculture and forestry. And while this land use supports the huge population, it also imposes some serious environmental implications with regards to, if you think about the combination of steep slopes and hills, heavy rains, and then intensive land use, that makes most of Rwanda vulnerable to soil erosion, flash floods, as well as landslides. And according to the Rwanda Environmental Management Authority, over 40% of the land in Rwanda is actually facing high risk of erosion, and 37% of that needs soil retention strategies to maintain stability. And that's where the Rwanda Bamboo River Restoration Project comes in, because it aims to stabilize the land, reducing natural hazards, as well as creating an opportunity for people in the rural communities and to support their livelihoods as well. So a big part of the project revolves around what is called a riparian buffer zone. And riparian comes from the Latin word called ripa, and it means riverbank. And this refers to areas of vegetation that can be found along rivers, lakes, or streams. And these buffer zones aren't just pretty areas of greenery. They actually have a function, and mainly functioning as nature's filter, reducing sediment and chemical runoff from land-based activities, from farms, stabilizing riverbanks, and riparian zones also are crucial in terms of maintaining or providing habitat for wildlife as well as vegetation control. And without vegetation, these buffer zones start to erode, destabilizing the soil, thereby increasing pollution in water systems and disrupting natural ecosystems. So restoring these areas are not just good for the environment, they're also essential for protecting communities and farmlands that are downstream. So the Rwandan government has identifying restoring these riparian buffer zones as an environmental priority. And there have been numerous pilot projects that have taken place in the past, in the last 10, 15 years or so, which were aimed at restoring these areas. However, the challenges remain that in terms of long-term maintenance, mainly due to the lack of sufficient funding. And that's where carbon financing comes in and offers a way to sustain these large-scale restoration efforts over long-term periods, providing a steady source of funding, which thereby is able to keep restoring and maintaining the riverbanks without having to rely on short-term resources. So to tackle this problem of soil erosion and enhancing carbon storage, the project introduces 2 species of non-invasive giant clumping bamboo. And bamboo is ideal for this work because it grows incredibly fast, reaches maturity within at least 3 years. And with this rapid growth rate, also thereby results to quick carbon sequestration. Aside from the carbon sequestration capacity, the compact and sturdy root systems of the bamboo make it ideal for stabilizing soil, especially those along riverbanks, preventing soil erosion. And then aside from the carbon side, it also provides other ecological benefits, such as reducing flooding by slowing down water flow, improving water quality, reducing siltation, and providing green cover along critical buffer zones. So to give you an overview of the project, so the Rwanda Bamboo River Restoration Project is categorized as an agriculture, forestry, and land use initiative. So it's an FLU project that's specifically focused on revegetation. And that's because this area these areas where bamboo is planted has been historically forested, but over the last decades, forests were cleared to make way for agriculture. And through this project, we're aiming to increase forest cover, focusing purely on conservation. So there is no harvesting, and it's all about restoring the landscape of these areas. One thing that we would also like to mention is that this project is also the first validated and registered nature-based solution project in Rwanda under the Verified Carbon Standard. And it's actually one of the 3 NBS projects that can be found in the country. And to give you a sense of scale, we're restoring 1,000 hectares over the 2 years. And this project area, this 1,000 hectares, that's roughly the distance from London to Berlin. And the project is set to run for 20 years from 2022. So the first bamboo plants were planted 2 years ago, and that's going to run until 2042. And it's expected to remove approximately 430 tons of CO2 equivalent during that period. Excuse me. And now let's talk about the people behind this project, because the primary stakeholders for this project are actually the small-scale farmers living next to these planting areas. And they're very integral to the project success. So you have the village leaders, you have the farmers, the bamboo rangers, all of whom are responsible for caring for the bamboo plants, and thereby instilling a sense of ownership and pride. And this taps into Rwanda's cultural values as well, of shared responsibility and community unity. The project also has substantial social benefits, and over 40% of the people employed through this project are actually women. And through the project, they're able to actually earn higher wages compared to other restoration projects in the region. So this income allows them to send their kids to school beyond the 9 years of free public education, and provides better healthcare access. So through the community-based health insurance scheme, these employees can now pay towards their health insurance whenever they need to. And all in all, this project strengthens local livelihoods, supports education, and provides better healthcare, creating long-term benefits for the community as well as the environment. So as you can see in the picture here, here's the landscape that we're looking to restore. And through this project, we're really trying to make a direct impact on the communities in Rwanda while contributing to the global climate goals. And our aim is not only to stabilize riverbanks and preventing erosion along these riverbanks, but mainly empowering communities and providing employment and other livelihood opportunities for these rural communities. And that's it. I'll hand it back over to Alina.
Thank you so much, Angela. A really spectacular project and such a beautiful country. And we will hear a little bit more later today about the Rwanda Bamboo Project. But I just wanted to quickly say a huge thank you to Nimal, Otto, and Angela. I'm always in awe of your knowledge, but also your passion for this project and the difference that you make. But we'll now continue with our webinar. And what I'm hoping is top of your mind after hearing about these 3 amazing projects is how can you get involved? How can you impactfully contribute to climate action and empowering communities? And that's really what I want to talk about a little bit today. The good news is that at Climate Partner Impact, we have many different ways in which you can get involved with our projects, depending on your size, budget, time frame, your vision, and your climate goals. And the 2 ways that I want to talk about today are impact contribution and project development. And just to keep it practical, let's just use an example of one of our projects. Let's go back to South Africa and look at Spekboom project. Let's say you attended this session, you got very excited, and you want to contribute to this project. Your option number 1 is to make an impact contribution, where it's a one-off financial contribution that you give to us. We plant a certain number of Spekboom for you in South Africa. We give you a certificate that confirms that, and also help you communicate your contribution transparently to your stakeholders and your employees. So that's a really nice and easy way to get involved, and we work with many companies that do just that. We also work with other companies that want an ongoing long-term partnership. These companies invest in a share of our project. For example, sticking with Spekboom, you invest in 500 hectares or 1,000 hectares of our Spekboom project. And as a result, for the duration of the life of that project, which in this case is 30 years, you get access to the full stream of carbon credits that come from this project. So that's another way in which companies could get involved. Now, what would be an advantage of this approach, for example? I think the first one is pretty straightforward, nice and simple, but why long-term project development? And that's what I wanted to mention a little bit about. We work with many companies that we have this long-term partnership with. And I think it goes without saying that supporting these projects goes a long way towards global net zero and impactfully helping the local communities. But in addition to that, there are huge business advantages to supporting this project as a long-term involvement. Number one is we speak to many companies that tell us that want to contribute to impactful climate action, but they are absolutely terrified of greenwashing accusations. Getting involved in the project at an early stage means you have greater control, oversight, and greater transparency. Just to give you an idea, our contributors, so our financial and corporate investors that we work with, they get regular reports. They get access to monitoring reports, for example, from our Earth observation team that use satellite data to monitor our projects in near real time. We've got our project developers on the ground who give us regular reports. We've got photos, videos, drone footage. So you get access to all of that. Most of our clients also visit the project, meet the local communities, and really get deeply involved in it. And that gives them that security and that peace of mind that they know exactly what's happening on the ground. We can find a project that can be a perfect match to your brand. And I've got a really lovely example of that for you coming up shortly. It, of course, helps you position yourself as a climate leader and really stand out from the rest. And the fourth benefit that is often named as the reason why our clients are really keen for this long-term partnership is the fact that all the market data and the forecasts that you see consistently suggest that the demand for carbon credits is expected to increase exponentially in the future. So if you look at the demand drivers at the moment, we've got net zero commitments from various corporates, SBTi commitments. We have things like COSIA, which is the aviation scheme. We've got nationally determined contributions of different countries. We've got the carbon taxes in different countries. So there's very strong suggestion that demand is going to grow very quickly and to a very high level. On the other hand, what we're also seeing is that the supply of high quality carbon credits, particularly high quality removals, which is what often many of the standards would require, are quite constrained. So the companies that we work with really like the idea of locking in the price, the quality, and the volume of carbon credits in a project that they feel really excited and comfortable with. And that's really another reason and another advantage of getting involved in long-term project development. But of course, I can keep talking about this for a long time. What I think will be a lot more interesting for you is to hear from one of your clients. This particular video that I'm going to show you is from Stefan Wartman, who is the CEO of Brook Group. Brook Group is a global innovative infrastructure solutions provider. They're headquartered in Switzerland, but they have offices all around the world. And they do so many different things through a number of their businesses, ranging from e-mobility, industrial, wind and power solutions, to building cable cars. And one of their business units actually builds those steel wire fences that you probably all have seen. If you drive along the mountains roads, you'll have those fences above the roads to protect against rockfalls, avalanches, and debris. Now, this particular company have been working with Climate Partner, who are our parent company, for quite a few years. So they started by calculating their carbon footprint, setting reduction targets, and very quickly they realized they wanted to make a real tangible impact outside of their value chain as well. And that's when they started talking to us at Climate Partner Impact about investing in our project. So you will remember Angela was talking about Rwanda Bamboo Project, where we plant clamping bamboo to protect the local communities against the flooding of the rivers. So for the Brook Group, this was really that's really resonated, because what we do with bamboo in Rwanda is very similar to what they do with their solutions. So they use technology to protect local communities. So it was a perfect fit. And what I'll do now is share a video where we interviewed Stefan, the CEO of Brook Group, and he'll tell you exactly what the experience was like.
Brook Group is happy to partner with Climate Partner Impact in the Rwanda Bamboo project. First of all, it was very important to us to do a measurable project with carbon emission removal. And this means growing something. And the combination of growing bamboo and help to stop erosion was a perfect combination to us, because erosion control, natural hazard protection is in the heart of the Brook Group, and it's the core of the GeoBrook business with erosion controls, slope stabilization, rockfall protection and other measures against natural hazards. And the partnership together with Climate Partner Impact is allowing us to really co-develop the project together. Sustainability is anchored in our values. That's very, very important, first of all. But second, sustainability is also part of our global strategy. We want to share this together with partners and our clients, because we truly believe that's part of a long-term future in infrastructure. The Climate Partner Group was already partnering with us in the past. And therefore, it was more than logic when we evaluated potential partners for this journey that we also had a deeper look into the existing partner. And then we were checking over several months how this could develop, how are their values, how are our values. And in the end, it was a total match, and we're very happy. Look, we could have bought from anybody some certificates, but that's not really the way we wanted to do it. We wanted to have a long-term impact that we can also steer ourselves. We wanted to go beyond carbon. We wanted to have additional benefits for the local communities, also on the S of the ESG and not only the E. And we believe that this co-benefiting is really a key success factor for the long-term target of this project. I believe there should be a certain match with your strategy, with your vision, with your overall goals. But beside all these factors, you must feel comfortable with the people behind the company, but also all the surrounding partners. And that makes a strong partnership in the long run. What was convincing was the overall view and the overall strategy on both sides, where we had a big match. The dedication that we could feel from Climate Partner Impact, that goes to your heart, goes to your mind. We had 2 people even that went down there to check everything. And what they saw there was exactly what was promised. But they realized there is really much more in this project. The people, they saw women involved too. And how much the local population loves the project, because it helps them to protect their fields and to protect the riverbeds. And that was really adding to the total value of just carbon footprint reduction.
Thank you so much. Hopefully this got you inspired, and you also would like to get involved in one of our really wonderful and impactful projects. So these 3 were just a little selection. We have many, many others. We would love to speak with you and see how we can support your climate action goals. In a moment, we have a few minutes to take some questions, and there have been some really, really brilliant questions coming through the chat, so please keep them coming. And as I said, if we don't get a chance to answer all of them today, we will be sure to reach out to you and answer them anyway. Just a couple of points I wanted to quickly mention before we jump to questions is that we would, as I said, love to hear from you and talk about how we can support you. We would also love to see you at our next webinar, which is happening in about a month's time. And there we'll be delving quite deep into voluntary carbon markets and answering some of the most common questions that our clients ask us. So you can just use the QR code to register if this is of interest. So now let's jump into a couple of questions. There's some really, really good ones, and we've tried to answer them as we go along. But there have been a couple that asked in sort of different ways. How do we actually measure CO2 sequestration values? How do we estimate it? Otto, would you like to jump in and maybe give us a brief explanation for those people that are not sort of as familiar with project development? How do we know how much CO2 has been removed from the atmosphere?
Yeah, so there are two different things that happen. First is your ex-ante estimation. So you try and determine beforehand how much carbon is going to be sequestered. And then there's the ex-ante measurement. So afterwards, you actually go out and you go and measure these plants. You take samples and you see how much carbon has been sequestered. But it's based on allometric equations. So a lot of species grow in a very certain pattern over time. So it grows along a curve. And at certain times, you can then tell how much carbon is captured in this. So for speckworm, for example, it's been done through destructive sampling. So what they actually did is take hundreds and thousands of samples, okay, of speckworm, and you actually cut it down, you dry it out, or you measure it. Every single branch, you measure it, and you dry it out, and you calculate how much is actually CO2 captured within that plant. And from that, we've got these beautiful curves that can tell us, what to expect over time. And what will happen afterwards, now that we know that, we can go out to the field and actually go and measure the plant over time, whether that's your basal stem diameter, your branches. And from those calculations, we'll then be able to tell how much carbon is captured in that. Okay, so you've got those samples, and then of course you can extrapolate that over space. So sorry, I'm getting a bit technical, but this is so the estimates beforehand, and then at each verification event, that then gets independently audited by a verification validation body, and yeah, that's where we then end up with our ex-ante credits that get issued.
Thank you, Otto. Yes, you get very excited about these topics, but I feel like you explained it very, very well. We have a couple of other really some really great questions. One question I'd like to take is, what about technological removals? Should we be focusing on those rather than nature-based solutions? And that is a really good question. And sometimes I see there's a bit of a debate about which solution is better. And the truth is, our position is that the stage where we are as a society, we need every single solution that we can get our hands on. So absolutely, technological removals are very important, and we do need to invest in them also to scale them up. But at the moment, they are not really at the stage where they're really deployable at the scale where they'll make a huge difference. So we do need to invest there, but we also know that nature is scalable, efficient, and cost effective. So we are at the stage where every single tool in our box must be used to solve this really, really big problem that we're facing. There's also a question for Angela on a Rwanda bamboo project, and that's just around how do we go about engaging local communities when we want to start one of these projects?
Thanks, Alina, and thank you for the question, whoever sent that. So as we're scaling up with this project, our local partner, the local project developer, conducts stakeholder engagement, stakeholder consultations with the communities that are looking to have the project in their areas, because since starting this project 2 years ago, there have been a lot of interest from different communities in different districts throughout Rwanda for wanting to expand the project within their own areas. And so before doing so, our local partner, the project developer, goes over to those districts, conducts stakeholder engagement consultations, and then discuss it with the village leaders, with the community members, what the project will entail and how will they benefit from it, and what kind of role they will be playing in the project. So in brief, that's how it goes.
Thank you so much, Angela. Absolutely. So community engagement is a really big part of our process, because these projects will never succeed without communities being really excited and being really on board. Thank you so much. We are running out of time, so we still have quite a few questions. We answered many of them in writing, but those that we haven't, we'll be sure to do so shortly. I just wanted to say a huge thank you on behalf of Angela, Otto, Nimal, and I for you taking an hour out of your day to listen to our webinar. We are so keen to talk more about any questions that you have. Feel free to reach out, and thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day or afternoon, and we will see you hopefully at the next webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.